Good afternoon and welcome to yet another remote learning PowerPoint session. So in this PowerPoint we're going to be looking at commercialization. This is relevant to OCR A-Level PE, and we're going to look at a concept or a principle called the golden triangle. Hopefully as we're going through this PowerPoint, if you can make some notes in your folders, in your books, and there's a few tasks as well, so obviously pause the video whilst completing those tasks. So our first task is a 5 in 5. So if you can just pause the video for 5 minutes and take 5 minutes to look at these 5 different questions. Some things that we've studied recently, some that we've done a little bit further back. But if you can take 5 minutes, pause the video and have a go at these, please. So hopefully you've had a chance to do those 5 questions. We'll just now briefly go through the answers together. If you can mark your own, and where necessary just do a bit of dirt on there, just remark them or reword your answers. First question asks you to list 4 negative effects of the media from sport. Now I've got a list here. It's not a fully comprehensive list, there could be others, but you can see the type of things that you could have had. So have a look through this list, see if it matches what you've got. There's our negative effects, and there's our positive effects. So hopefully you've managed to come up with 4 negative and 4 positive. Question 2 asks what beta blockers do and which type of sports person they may be useful for. Hopefully you came up with that they control our heart rate, so it may be useful for those sports performers that do fine or complex skills such as darts or golf or snooker. Question 3, why might an athlete take anabolic steroids? Anabolic steroids can increase muscle mass, and in turn they can speed up muscle repair and growth. Question 4, list 5 cultural factors that have helped to shape sport in the UK. This was our historical, when we're looking at our historical aspects of sport. And the kind of areas you could have looked at would be class, how the class system changed, gender, education, money, leisure time, transport, law and order, amateurism and professionalism. And perhaps in the future we'll be looking at this current time and COVID and coronavirus and the impact that has on sport in the UK, both participating and obviously watching. And then question 5, what is progressive part practice, and can you give a sporting example of when it may be used? So progressive part practice is when the skill is broken down into parts. The performer learns one part, then the next, and so on. And the one that I always refer to, and I think the one we practiced outside, was the triple jump, where you can learn the different phases and different aspects of the triple jump. So that was just a little 5 in 5 to hopefully get the brain working. As I mentioned, we're looking at commercialization, and we're going to look at a concept called the golden triangle. First of all, we're going to have a little look at the coverage of sport by media today and how it's changed. So originally, in the 70s and 80s, media coverage of sport was very different to how it is today. If I think back to my childhood, there wasn't as much sport on telly. Any sport that was on telly was on terrestrial TV on at the time, probably 1, 2 or channel 1, 2 or 3, and there was no pay-per-view. So at the moment we've got Sky TV, pay-per-view subscriptions, we've got the internet, loads of different initiatives and technology that have developed and meant that sport now can be seen, can be viewed 24/7. If you want to, there are specific sport channels for football, for golf, for racing, for virtually any sport, and if you want to, you can watch it 24/7. And this ties in with different subjects. If you want to, you can be betting on it 24/7. So the coverage of sport by the media has vastly improved, or not necessarily improved, but increased. As I said, in the 1980s, the only accessible global events were the Olympics, which happens obviously every 4 years, and the World Cup. These were the only 2 events that could be viewed all around the world for everyone to see. And these would have been on terrestrial TV, so probably on Channel 1, BBC One or ITV in this country. Today, it's very different. You can see the type of media on the left. If you haven't spent a minute or so looking through this table, you can see the type of media on the left as you look at it. What the coverage on that media was in the 1980s, and then what it is in the more recent times, in more modern day. So obviously you can see things such as there was no internet, there was no pay-per-view sport, no Sky TV, no dedicated sports radio stations such as 5 Live or Talk Sport. The only really coverage came from free-to-air TV and some local and national radio, newspapers, and there was a few magazines, a few sport-specific magazines. Now you can see it's increased tenfold. There's far more avenues for media to be involved with. The main change, one of the biggest change, was when Sky TV came in. So in the 1990s there was the development of Sky TV and the right to televise live at the time First Division football since changing to the Premiership. But this had a massive impact. It meant far more sport, particularly football, could be watched all around the world, and that branched out and meant that sport and football teams, English football teams, Italian and Spanish football teams could be watched all over the world. So they became a global brand, and that's just grown and grown to current day. There's still lots of underrepresented activities, far less female sport on TV, far less disabled sport on TV, but it is improving. It's improving slowly, but still doesn't compare to the top sports and the coverage available for the top athletes. Why has this changed? What's happened? Reasons for the change in the media since the 1980s. So as we said, one of probably the main, and if this was a question, the main thing area you'd want to cover would be the introduction of satellite TV in the 1990s. Sky spent money on securing prominent sporting events. Their big headline events were things such as football and boxing, and this was available for people to subscribe to, pay for, and watch all around the world, thus introducing and developing and spreading that sport and those names of these sporting superstars and sporting teams all around the world. In the 1980s, sports presenters were generally male, and very little attention was paid to female sport. This has moved on. I would think the statistics, there probably still is more male sports presenters, but it definitely has improved and has moved on. And there is more female sport on telly than there was in the 80s. Unfortunately, football hooliganism was rife in the 1980s, and often the media was dominated by reports of the negative behaviour of sports spectators. This was a real issue, particularly in England, and it gave the sport a bad reputation, and perhaps sponsors, advertising didn't necessarily want to get involved with British football at the time. There are now, as you know, far more different types of media. Media coverage is global, and events are recorded or streamed online. You can watch it on the internet, you can watch it on the telly, you can get long-term subscriptions, you can get short-term subscriptions. Recently, Amazon have had lots of football matches on over the last month or so. You can subscribe to Now TV either just for a day or for a week or for a month, so you can watch specific football matches in the comfort of your own home. As we mentioned earlier, there's many more sports are now accessible, but we still have the minority sports and the female sports still underrepresented on mainstream TV and in this country. So some positive and negative effects of media in sport. As I said, just pause when necessary to take some notes, add some notes in your folders. So we know that the media can raise the profile of many sports and individual players. Exposure of those sports can also lead to increase in participation. Great example, when Wimbledon comes on every summer, all of a sudden you see the tennis courts filling up, people start to play tennis, perhaps those that wouldn't normally, tennis club membership goes up. I know I'm someone that does that, probably won't play tennis at all. Wimbledon comes on, watch a bit on telly, get the bug, and I want to go out and play tennis, which is obviously great because it's increasing participation rates, getting more people out there playing. Likewise, when the Olympics are on, lots of people watching sports they wouldn't normally watch, seeing events they wouldn't normally see. It introduces loads and loads of new sports to a new audience, and hopefully in turn increases participation rates. With all this media coverage, it's also going to increase the amount of revenue from sponsorships. If it's on telly, if people are watching it, playing it, companies are going to want to get involved with these sports. You can see on that picture, we've got this 2012, you've got big brands such as Coca-Cola getting involved with the Olympics, putting lots of money into the sport, which hopefully can be reinvested down to grassroots level and improve facilities and participation rates in those sports and activities. Just one example here, the average ratings for live test match cricket used to be on Channel 4. I remember watching the cricket, the test matches on Channel 4, and the average ratings between 2004 and 2013 were between 1.05 million and 1.32 million each year. In 2006, Sky Sports got the viewing rights for the home series, that the test matches being played in this country, and you can see how the amount of people watching it dropped to 0.23 million. This is obviously a big disadvantage. With less people watching the sport, less people are like to take an interest, perhaps less people participating. In the recent Cricket World Cup, the final was actually broadcast on Channel 4, and I think the viewing figures went through the roof. I know from my point of view, there was a chance all my family were watching the World Cup final, seeing England in the World Cup final. If it was on Sky, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So there's lots of discussion around sport being on mainstream telly, and then more people can watch it, more people are like to get involved and participate in these sports. Some more negative effects of media on sport. For some sports, the influence of the media has led to changes in the rules and structure of things. Rules are being adapted to increase the speed of play or action to prevent spectator boredom. You could argue this is a good thing or a bad thing, depending on whether you're a purist and you like the sport how it was, or you like these new changes. An example in football, the multi-ball system. So as soon as the ball goes out, there's another ball waiting on the side, and that's speeded up the game. There's less time spent just watching, waiting for the players to retrieve the ball. Ball boys positioned all the way around the pitch. As soon as the ball goes out, the game goes on, so it's a lot quicker to watch. There's been some change in scoring systems which help create excitement. For example, in badminton, you can now score on any rally, not just on your serve. Golden goal was introduced in football rather than penalties and extra time. The use of the golden goal was tried and introduced. Breaks in play are an ideal time for sponsors and commercial companies to advertise. American football, if you ever watch an American football match, it goes on for an awful long time. Numerous breaks in play. All these are opportunities for adverts to appear, for sponsors to get their say. They know millions of people are going to be watching the game. It's a chance for them to get their product or their company on the screen during that time with a massive audience. In some sports, the competition formats have changed. 2020 cricket is a short and more exciting than Test cricket. It used to be just Test cricket was the main sport played. Now, more and more people watching 2020 cricket. You can go along in an evening and watch a game of cricket in 3 hours, rather than a game lasting 5 days. Perhaps this has made the sport more attractive to people, more exciting, and opened up the sport to far more people. And some extra you can see on 2020, some different bits that have come on field on bowler restrictions to try and make the game more exciting and more attractive to those watching it. One big change has been the match timings, particularly at the current times. Here we are in January 2021 with coronavirus going on. Match timings have changed. It used to be football was a Saturday afternoon sport. As we know, we looked at our historical side. 3 o'clock kickoffs on a Saturday afternoon. Now, there's games on all the time. And these match timings have been altered to suit TV viewings. There's games on non-stop, so you can flick from one game to another game to another game. It gets more and more people watching sport on telly, particularly football. So the media can promote positive or negative news stories. This isn't always a good thing because it puts pressure on the performers and their families. They know that they're being scrutinised at every move. Some professionals, as we know, they sort of court this publicity and they use it to their advantage. For others, it's hard to get away from. If you're a sports performer now, a top-level sports performer, you are very much in the public eye and you're being scrutinised, your behaviour both on and off the pitch. This can sometimes put the game into disrepute. It can sometimes give a bad impression of the sport or the sports performers. And that might in turn mean sponsors, advertising, don't want to be associated with that performer or that particular sport. Media can also hype up some of the behaviour. And this pressure, and particularly social media, could possibly be a reason for the rising player and spectator violence, hooliganism. People can be in touch, they can be offended by what's written on social media, and they can react accordingly. So one aspect, as I mentioned, the next aspect we're going to look at, a new heading here, is something called the golden triangle. This is often talked about when we talk about commercialisation and media in sport. It's an important concept called the golden triangle. And you can see on the picture on the screen there, it looks at the relationship between sport, media and sponsorship. And you can see how the 3 areas intertwine and how they all affect each other. As it mentions on the screen there, each side of the triangle benefits from the other side in some way. Therefore, each side is dependent on the other side in some way, usually financial or for promotion. Sport, sponsorship and the media, they all rely on each other. So I'd like to just pause the video, take a moment. Can you have a little think, what benefit does each group get from the other two? So why does sport need media and sponsorship? Why does the sponsors need sport and media? And why does media need sport and sponsors? Just pause the screen, try and think of why they all rely on each other in those 3 areas. So hopefully you have a chance to do that. In a nutshell, sport needs media and sponsorship to raise its status and profile. That means they can invest in developing both elite and grassroots sport. Sponsors use the media to advertise their products. Using sports stars to advertise makes their products even more desirable. And the media need sport because of the high demand for viewing. They also need the sponsors as really healthy advertising revenues and streams of income for them. But they all rely on each other. If you do get a question on commercialisation in your exam, golden triangle is often an important area to look at, and it might be worth just sketching the golden triangle in your plan to help you answer it and make sure you look at the relationship between the 3 areas. Okay, the next part, I'll send this link separately as well, but I would like you to just spend some time watching the following 15-minute video, which summarises what we spoke about around commercialisation, media and the sport. Once you've done that, there's a key question there. Does TV now run sport? Has commercialisation killed the game? Bit of a debating question. What I would like you to do, individually, can you go and research some of the arguments for and against this statement? Can you try and find facts and figures to back up your argument? These would be particularly helpful to add to any future work. There's loads of articles and reports around this topic. Lots there, and hopefully we can meet and we can discuss some of these areas that you've found. The final task, which I'll introduce here, but we can do it at a different time, is as follows. There's a past paper question. The golden triangle concerns the relationship between sport, sponsorship and the media. Evaluate the effects of the golden triangle on sport today. It's a 6-mark question. The key word there is evaluate. So that's looking at the advantages and disadvantages, the pros and cons, the good and the bad. I will also set this question as a separate task for you to have a go at. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to take some detailed notes. You can pause this video, you can re-watch it, and I'll provide more information to you directly on how I'd like you to use this PowerPoint. Thank you.